Brought to you by Staff DNA, the #1 digital marketplace for healthcare careers. Find a job you love today with Staff DNA. Today's episode is with Zoraida Salas-Allison, and it's a good one. If you're a nurse or a leader, or both a nurse and a leader, she gives a lot of great advice to take away. Here are some highlights of the episode ahead.
Any experience in any healthcare setting is going to give you a point up. I'm like, oh, good. How long were they there? What do they do? Whether it's behavioral, maybe if you're a behavioral health tech, I'm like, awesome. You're going to learn some de-escalation tools. That's what I need right now in the hospital. So that's a big plus. If you were a CNA, that's a huge plus. Even if you were in assisted living or acute care, if you were in assisted living, I know you know what a full load is. Like you have 12 to 15, 20 patients probably. So I get it. You can handle a lot of workload. So that's a plus. Volunteering in a healthcare setting. I had somebody recently who was in a kind of a mobile urgent care company. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. What was that? I've had people be med techs or med assistants in different states. And so I found out that they can do different things in our patient care. So any experience I think is a plus. And I know as a student, I think they're just afraid and they just want to ask. Of course, ask me the tactical stuff, self-scheduling ratio. Of course you want to know that, but dig deep a little and really prepare. It's pretty amazing how many times I'm like, okay, so now's the time for you to ask me questions. What kind of questions you ask? And we've talked a little bit about the unit, and there's no questions about the unit. There's no questions about the type of patients. There's no questions about what does it mean to have an alcohol withdrawal patient? Can you help me understand that? What does that mean? And they may never have exposure to that in the clinical setting. Ask questions. Show me you're curious, because if you're curious with me in the interview, then I know you'll be curious when it comes time to figure out ways to improve the care of the patient. But if you're not curious with me in the interview, what makes me think that when you see something different in your patient that you're going to ask the doctor about it, or look something up, or ask the pharmacist, hey, do you think the medicine could be doing this to him? Improve the care. Or are you just going to check the box? I did my assessment, I did my restraint, I did check. I'm like, that's just, anybody can check a box.
Zoraida didn't actually start off wanting to become a nurse. Her natural curiosity and love for personal connections actually had her going down the path to be a journalist. But after life threw her a few unexpected curveballs, she began to reflect on her career choices and experiences, which ultimately led her back down the path into healthcare.
Having exposure to the hospital, schedule, smells, routine, environment, patients, families, anywhere that you can really interact and see our patient population in their most vulnerable state, and you're okay with it and you enjoy it, then that's going to help you. Versus waiting all 4 years, you've never walked into a hospital, you think this is what you want. Maybe even before you start that first year when you're taking your general sciences, get in. Really see if you even want to be in that setting. Hospitals aren't for everybody. It's not Grey's Anatomy, it's not glamour and glitz, it's really not. It's rough, but it's amazing, but it's different. And it's not theory. It's very practicality, very practical, it's very real. Say, there's other ways to help people, right? Yep. So that's why I say if you can get that early exposure, because you may realize, oh my God, I don't want to work in a hospital, but I do want to be a nurse, but maybe this kind of nurse, right? And
there she found a calling that changed her life. From hands-on clinical work in pediatric intensive care to leading hospitals through major transitions, Zoraida has built a career on asking the right questions, staying humble, and always showing up for her team.
I think it's okay for staff to see that you're not perfect. I think one of the best things that I do is I admit when I'm wrong to my staff. I think that is really, I think some leaders never do that. And I think that can be dangerous, because then your staff is going to feel that they can't make a mistake and admit that they're wrong. I mean, they have no idea. They don't realize what it really means with the art of nursing. They know the science, which is beautiful, and you need to know that, but then there's the art of nursing, and it's being able to clean somebody up while still giving them the dignity, having them smile, talk to them, making them feel comfortable, and not ashamed that their illness caused this to happen.
In this episode, Zoraida shares powerful, no-nonsense advice for healthcare professionals in all stages of their career, including leadership.
I think patience with yourself is probably one of the hardest things new managers struggle with, right? they're not there, especially if they've been a nurse, they're like, I've been a nurse for 15 years. So they think that this is just going to come as easy and change will happen and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, this is very different. This is a whole different role. So really giving yourself grace, just like you did when you were at the bedside, learning how to be that excellent clinician, right? You gave yourself grace. So give yourself grace in learning how to have the conversations and learning how to do those coaching methods and those coaching sessions. Recognizing that there may be days where 80% of the staff is really not happy with you, right? Because you have to implement a change, maybe due to regulatory, maybe because of the message that came down. But if you are honest and transparent with them, they'll get on your side, right? They'll understand. So I think for me, when you're a new leader, like being honest and transparent with your staff as much as you can goes a long way. And everybody makes mistakes. So if that employee was to come back to me and say, hey, I gotta let you know, I gotta own it. That was on me. Won't happen again. Perfect. Check it off. They recognized it. They owned it. No problem. Happens a third time, but still no accountability and no check. That's a big red flag, right? That tells me you did great in the interview. You're not taking this seriously. Safety for me is extremely important, and it's the first thing you need to do as a clinician. And if you're not taking those safety ABCs, parameters, all of that, and I think sometimes on med-surg units and tele units, they just go, that's ICU. And I'm like, nope, everybody has airway, breathing, and circulation. Everybody has it. Your room needs to be prepared for the worst, and you have the equipment. You don't take that seriously. You don't take infection control issues seriously. That's a problem. The irony is all this communication is all written, but nobody really does really good writing. You know what I mean? Nobody really does English and all that. So it's all abbreviations and text and quick chats and emojis. And they think, oh, I'm going to say it, but then I'll put an emoji so it won't sound as bad. And I'm like, yeah, that was a snarky comment. Putting a wink at the end of it, not going to really smooth it over for me. FYI, just like in texting, all caps means you're yelling at me, accusing me and saying these things. Harsh. I am your manager. I'm your director. I'm the end receiver. Are you really that angry or are you really shouting at me? I'm like, no, I didn't mean that. And I'm like, okay, that's how it came across. So remember, there's no tone in written language, right? There's no tone in a text. There's no tone in a chat. So be mindful of that. There's an acronym, HALT, which says never send an email. And in today's world, you could say text, you could say chat, right? Just never send anything in writing if you are hungry, angry, feeling lonely, or really tired.
Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Halt.
Tired. Yep.
If any of those are applying to you at this moment.
Email, chat, no. You could imagine like if you've broken up with somebody. You can even take it in there. And you're angry, you're lonely. What are you going to do? You're going to send that text. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't send the text.
Whether you're fresh out of school or trying to grow as a leader, Zoraida's story is a masterclass in staying grounded, solving real problems, and never forgetting why you started. And now a word from our sponsor. Are you ready to take the next step in your healthcare career? Staff DNA is not just the #1 digital marketplace for your healthcare career, it's your gateway to exciting opportunities. With the Staff DNA app, you can effortlessly find nursing, allied, physician, and advanced practice positions nationwide, all tailored to your skills and preferences. Find a job you love today with Staff DNA. From the beginning, just talking about what got you into nursing. Did you want to go specifically into nursing or did you want to go into healthcare?
No, neither. Actually, my first career choice, like true career choice, was journalism. And I started that in college at Columbia College in Chicago. Went on the radio, was trying to learn how to be a DJ. And really I was very curious. And so I wanted to be a journalist. Ironically, I think that curiosity has really actually helped me to excel in my nursing career and as a leader, and especially as a clinician. Yeah, journalism was my first. Nursing was not. I always say I'm not the typical, I think, nurse that says, oh, I always wanted to be a nurse. I was 9 years old. I knew from the get-go. I've never had that, except I knew I was always curious. I asked a lot of questions. And then just through life, the journalism route didn't work out. I lost my grant, couldn't afford college anymore.
Oh, wow.
And left and actually went to LA for 2 years. Had a lot of fun in LA. And it was super fun living on my own and just enjoying that city. And then I was like, oh God, I really got to figure out my life. I'm 23, which sounds so young, but I really was like, I got to do something. And then I just started reflecting back on my jobs prior to that. And so my jobs were, I worked for a pharmacist who was amazing. This was years before Walgreens came about or CVS started taking over. He was an independent pharmacist. He was amazing. And then I worked healthcare as a unit secretary for a large med surg unit. And then the nurses there, I loved them. This is back in the day where you could smoke in the staff lounge.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy. And they all joked around with me. And they're like, you'll be a nurse. I'm like, no, I see how much you work. There's no way I'm doing it. Not having it. And then at 23, though, I was like, gosh, I really have done a lot of jobs in that field, helping people. I was selling insurance, helping people. And so I decided to pursue science, basic science, and begin the general science for nursing and or medicine. I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to go. Medical school was too long for me. Becoming a doctor, I was like, oh, that's just too long. And so I went the nursing route, and I really enjoyed the classes. I just loved learning. I loved anatomy, physiology, and I just really enjoyed it. And originally I was like, okay, I'll become a nurse, and then maybe I will go back to med school. Like this will be good. I'll be able to work this way, earn a little bit more money. But I fell in love with it. It found me, and I'm so happy it did. And I never looked back. Like never. After once I got into it, I was like, I don't want to be a doctor. This is exactly what I want to do. So it was great. I was very blessed to just have it find me. So
That's
yeah.
the cool thing about that is a lot of people put healthcare as like plan A, and then they have a plan B. Healthcare seemed to have been your plan B, but you didn't know it.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. I wasn't sure if I even had a plan. I was 23. I'm always impressed by 23-year-olds that I meet and interview, and they have this amazing plan. I'm like, wow, yeah, that wasn't me. That's not, but it worked out fine. It worked out just fine.
And so when you were going through your early part of your career, when did you know that the nursing piece was it? That was what you wanted to do, or that was what you were meant to do? Was there a certain event or a situation that happened that you made you go, yeah, this was right?
Pretty early on, actually. Once I got into nursing school, so my program was a very traditional, what they call the diploma program. They don't exist anymore. Here. My school was the last two. There was like only two left in the country.
Oh, wow.
And we had just celebrated 100 years of that school. So in years past, your diploma programs were attached to a hospital. So majority were with a Catholic hospital, and the nurses would actually live in the dorms. It was a typical 3-year program. And from the get-go, you started working as a CNA side by your nurses. So the program remained very much traditional in that matter, but it was a 2-year program that they took. A 3-year program, dwindled it down to 2 years. So it was 2 years full around, or let me rephrase that, 2 years, like a full 2 years. You only got a month break in between. And so from the third week of school, we were working as nurses' aides or assistants with the actual nurses' aides and the nurses. And I just remember a patient that we had who she suffered from some sort of intestinal issue, and she had a lot of bleeding and a lot of diarrhea and urgency, and she didn't make it to the bedside commode, and she was so embarrassed and felt so bad. But the CNA and I were able to clean her up, not make her feel bad, provide her dignity, make her smile and laugh, get her back in bed. And I was like, yeah, I can do this. This is what I want to do. And the beauty of that approach, I think, was the nurses that thought the students that thought they wanted to do this quickly learned, yeah, I can't do this. This isn't for me. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but you didn't spend 4 years to figure that out, right? You found that out in your first 3 weeks. And so I think I wish today more nursing schools did that for nurses. I think it would actually, in the long run, decrease our turnover rate in that first year of nurses today. They just come into the acute care hospital setting. They have no idea. They don't realize what it really means, the art of nursing. They know the science, which is beautiful, and you need to know that. But then there's the art of nursing. And it's being able to clean somebody up while still giving them the dignity, having them smile, talk to them, making them feel comfortable, and not ashamed that their illness caused this to happen. And yeah, we lost a few, but they're probably in a better spot. And I think it was really after that I was like, yeah, I can do this. I want to do this.
That's awesome. So going into that, in terms of people that are brand new grads coming out of college, coming out of an ADN program, going into an acute care setting or some sort of healthcare setting to use their new degree, what advice do you have to be able to start off on the right foot, either a mentality or something you should do or something you should keep in mind?
I think if you can, either early on in your schooling, volunteer in a hospital if you're not able to work, so you don't have so many hours. If you need a position, and let's say you can't become a CNA or a patient care tech, I would even encourage being a transporter. Having exposure to the hospital schedule, smells, routine, environment, patients, families, anywhere that you can really interact and see our patient population in their most vulnerable state, and you're okay with it and you enjoy it, then that's going to help you. Versus waiting all 4 years, you've never walked into a hospital, you think this is what you want. And I think nowadays there is a group of nurses that are out there that have gone this path, right? The nurses now make a nice salary. You can live on your own. You can do very well. But I think they don't understand what it means really to be a nurse. And if you want to be in the acute care setting, it's very different than if you want to be a nurse, maybe at a med spa. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at all. And that's great. But understand that there's a certain level of skill, patience you need, understanding that is far different than any other environment if you're going to be a nurse in an acute care setting. So that would be my advice. If you can expose yourself early on in your academic career, don't wait until your third year of nursing school. Don't wait until, you're about to graduate. Honestly, maybe even before you start that first year when you're taking your general sciences, get in. Really see if you even want to be in that setting. Hospitals aren't for everybody. It's not Grey's Anatomy. It's not glamour and glitz. It's really not. It's rough, but it's amazing, but it's different. And it's not theory. It's very practicality. It's very practical. It's very real.
Do you think that's a misconception that a lot of new grads have or new healthcare professionals have, that it's going to be like the movies or like a television show that they've seen? Or do you think that more people are grounded than the opposite?
I think there's art always influences, right? So I think there's a little bit of that. Obviously, everybody knows it's not Grey's Anatomy. I was being facetious there,
of course.
Yeah. But I think it's just unrealistic. I think people fall in love with the idea of, I want to help people. And that's beautiful. So I think a lot of times their first instinct is medicine, healthcare. That's where I want to help people. And then they go nursing or physician. But that's not always the right path for those people, right? Because of the care and the work and the hard work that you have to do when you're a nurse, the physical toll, the mental toll, the spiritual toll, it's exhausting. Same for physicians. It's grueling hours. But there's other ways to help people, even so within healthcare. Social work, case management, therapy, physical therapy, respiratory therapy, speech therapy. There's a million one ways. And I think people get really just narrow focus and thinking, that's the 2 ways, that's it. I think then they get too far along in their academic career, right? How many people are too afraid to tell their parents if their parents are paying and it's a third year and I don't want to do this? Or they graduated and now they're like, oh my God, what did I do? Now I have a bachelor's in science and nursing, but I don't want to be a nurse. It's a horrible feeling. And I've had those conversations with some of my new grads, new hires, that I saw them struggle. They were so eager to start and great big hearts. But they were stressed. They couldn't eat. They were anxious, really high anxiety, crying. We had a lot of one-on-ones, support. And finally, I asked, do you really want to do this? And they were like, no. I'm like, okay. But they're like, but I still want to help people. I'm like, awesome. You have a great degree now. There's just other ways to do it. And they were like, oh, and the relief, you could literally see their shoulders go from up to relax and just feel better. And all of a sudden the tears went away and they were like, I gave them permission. I'm like, now it's just a matter of you finding out where it is that you want to do it. You can still be a nurse in different facets. You can still take what you did and how to help people. Maybe you want to be a therapist now, right? And so they're like, I do like that. I do sitting that one-on-one. And then I had a new grad who She was older. She was a mom. She had started nursing school. She had finished nursing school in her early 20s, but then had babies right away. And then, so she never was a nurse at the bedside. And so kids were grown. I never lost it. I always wanted to be it. And so she came back and worked at my unit, and she was doing great, but I could see the stress level on her. It wasn't the normal, oh, I'm nervous, I'm at work, it's a new job. It was really breaking my heart. And so we just talked, and luckily for her, we were able to find together, and the organization I work with was able to find her a role in another department that was an ambulatory department where she could be much more slower paced. It was one-on-one care, and she could still follow them in the hospital and then follow them in the ambulatory setting. And she loved it. I see her now. She smiles. She's got a pep in her step. She's the best thing ever. So I'm like, there's just a million ways to do it. And I think just taking the time, and hopefully you have somebody in your life that will say, there's other ways to help people, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I say, if you can get that early exposure, because you may realize, oh my God, I don't want to work in a hospital, but I do want to be a nurse, but maybe this kind of nurse, right? And the beauty today versus when I started was that everybody is a lot more open to new grads, right? Doctors' offices, case management departments, peri-op even will have new grad programs where they train them, urgent cares, pharmaceutical companies. And granted, you'd be more of a educator or consultant. You don't have too much experience, but if that's something you eventually want to do, you could do something a little less intense than acute care. You could maybe do an ambulatory setting, right?
Yeah.
So that's the nice thing, where when I started, it was pretty much one route. You had to find a med-surg department that would hire you, and you had to start on nights. That was it.
That's straightforward. Nights and med-surg, that was no other options, no routes.
No, no other
Wow.
options. Yep.
So if everybody's doing the same thing, how did you stand out?
So I originally wanted to be a cardiac nurse. I wanted to try cardiac med-surg because my mom had heart history. She had just developed heart disease after I graduated, or during nursing school, and then when I graduated. Not a single cardiac nurse manager would even look at me. They deny, wouldn't get an interview. The only person that interviewed me was a pediatric nurse manager. And I was like, I don't think I like kids. So I was like, I better go. I got to be open. I need a job. I went to school. I really want to be a nurse. Somebody's got to give me experience, right? And I thought, well, I'll gain experience. I'll be able to, I'm sure I can learn something from peds that I can take to adults. I fell in love. I did 6 months on a med-surg unit, and my manager at the time was amazing. And I was very lucky. She was like, listen, this is a satellite med-surg. We're not even sure if it's going to stay open, but you're very curious and you want to learn. So I'm going to get you an interview in the pediatric ICU at the downtown campus. And I was like, well, I don't know about that, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to try. Let's go. So I think one of the things that always had me stand out was I was like, yeah, I'll try it. I'll try it. If you can teach me, I'm willing to learn. And so I interviewed. I was okay. I was single. I was married, but I didn't have any kids. So I was like, I'll work nights. I'll work extra. What do you need me to do? And so I was willing to learn. And I've always been open. I've always had an open mindset. And many people don't. And I think that hurts them in the long run. So I think that just helped me stand out. And then I stayed on nights for the first 5 years of my career. And I learned so much and I loved it. And then I fell in love with the PICU. It was amazing. And then I went from Chicago to LA, remained in the PICU, still loved it, was still on nights. And that's where I got lucky because a day spot opened about a year after. And I was like, I'll take it. And my husband was very happy because he's, oh, thank God you're normal again. Because I thought I was fine on nights. I was fine well at work, but I guess I wasn't too fine after. I was like, oh, I didn't realize how sleepy I was on my days.
Do you think with the way that things have changed, how bringing new grads into different units makes it harder for people to stand out, or is it easier to stand out?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't think it affects it at all. I think for me, you know what? Actually, I'm going to take that back. I do think it makes it a little bit harder to stand out. Everyone's hiring new grads now. That's all that's there, right? So what really stands out now today is if you even have 2 years experience, I'm like, woo! And I'm going to grab that resume probably first. So that's probably not so fair, right? But in reality, 99% of my resumes that I see are all new grads. So I don't get that many. I really don't get that many experienced RNs. So I think it does hurt them a little bit. That's not available anymore. So everybody's a new grad. So how do I stand out as a new grad?
So that's a good question, though. In terms of maybe resumes, you mentioned getting some sort of experience, but when you're looking at resumes, is any healthcare experience better than zero or BSN versus ADN? What would be your guidance? I know that it could be 101 different variations, but what do you think about looking at resumes with some sort of healthcare experience as PCT or CNA versus zero, and then maybe somebody that has a BSN versus someone who has ADN plus experience?
Honestly, I think, so I'll take it a couple of steps. So definitely, if I'm looking, everybody's just a new grad, right?
Yeah.
Any experience in any healthcare setting is going to give you a point up. I'm like, oh, good. How long were they there? What do they do? Whether it's behavioral, maybe if you're a behavioral health tech, I'm like, awesome. You're going to learn some de-escalation tools. That's what I need right now in the hospital. So that's a big plus. If you were a CNA, that's a huge plus. Even if you were in assisted living or acute care, if you were in assisted living, I know you know what a full load is. Like you have 12 to 15, 20 patients probably. So I get it. You can handle a lot of workload. So that's a plus. Volunteering in a healthcare setting. I had somebody recently who was in a kind of a mobile urgent care company. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. What was that? I've had people be med techs or med assistants in different states. And so I found out that they can do different things in our patient care. So any experience I think is a plus. To be very honest, I don't put more weight on a BSN versus an ADN. And in full transparency, I'm probably biased. I started my career as a diploma program, right? So I was typically what you would consider an ADN today. I understand that there is literature to support that a BSN ultimately could improve quality outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to dispute that or argue that, but I think I'm also not going to ding somebody and not give them an opportunity to interview with me just because they purely don't have it. There are many reasons why people go through that route first. Honestly, financially, it's probably a smarter route. If I'm on my own and I want to become a nurse and I want to become a nurse quicker than later, I'm going to go to an ADN program, right? So then even if my future goal is to finish my BSN, I'm going to be smart and I'm going to have my company pay for that, right? So why would I not give that? I would never give that a ding to somebody. I would go, good for them. And most of the time, that is what happens. They come in and they're like, I want to become a nurse. I wanted to do it faster. I got into this program. And with all these wait lists, they're like, it's the same board that you take. So really from a financial aspect, why not? So I understand that. So for me personally as a leader, that doesn't sway me one way or the other. What will sway me is what have you done, even if it's volunteer prior, like listing your clinical hours. I know you went to clinical hours. It's great. Of course you did. You were in nursing school. So don't do that. I would highly recommend not to do that. A nice statement of why you want to work for that organization or why you want to be a nurse or why you became a nurse is probably really something nice to do on your top of your CV. But make sure it's not ChatGPT. Make sure it's not generic. Make sure it's something special about you, because it's very easy to know what is a ChatGPT answer, the general, and what is not. So be authentic. And absolutely, even if you have 6 months to 1 year of volunteer and or some sort of a healthcare experience, I'm going to look at that resume more and give it more weight and probably say yes to that interview versus somebody who doesn't. And that goes for my patient care techs too.
Would you say that there's any position before RN that gives you the best experience to set yourself up for success at an acute care facility, such as I've heard EMT and paramedic for ER. I've heard obviously of CNA, LVN type of assisted living can definitely help with a med surg. And seeing as though different units are bringing in new grads versus everybody going into the pool of med surg, is there a certain thing that somebody might do prior to their graduation date in terms of experience that would set them up to more closely resemble a hospital experience, in your opinion?
That's hard. I think you really can't replicate a hospital experience. I think the closest maybe thing you're going to get is probably a skilled nursing or an assisted living in the sense of the workload. Their acuity isn't maybe as high, but their ratio is definitely more. So you're going to come to me and you're going to go, wow, only 1 to 4. I was 1 to 20 at the skilled nursing facility. So I think, again, nothing's going to mimic acute care. There's nothing like it. They're very different. No, I think it's just a matter of what have you done to help prepare yourself as much as possible. Again, whether it's volunteer or not, I recently hired a patient care tech who believe it or not, was a mechanic. But I saw in his resume that he went back to nursing. He went back to become a CNA. Okay. His objective or his description was very unique, very much him. And when we interviewed, he full on told me it was between computers or nursing. And I was like, wow, that's really different. What made you? He goes, I want to be with people. I realized, yeah, I can do computer stuff and that's going to help me. But yeah, I can't do that all day. And so that's when I went back to become a CNA. And I've never had experience, but I put myself through CNA school and I'm just looking for somebody to give me a chance. And I got to tell you, he has been one of the best. He's a team player. Patients love him. He's a gentle giant, quiet, but kind. And he's been great. That to me, his resume stood out, and he stood out because I'm like, this gentleman took it upon himself as a different career, was like, the only way I'm going to know if I really want to do this, let me go to school for it. CNA was the quickest route for him to get his foot in the door. And eventually he is going to go back to school. He's waiting for his 6 months, and he's going to start applying. So now I have, hopefully for my organization and even my department, a long-term employee, right? So that's what I look for. What are you doing to help yourself stand out?
How does that translate into the actual interview itself? Because I've heard CV takes you into the interview. Then how do you convince them that you're the best to hire for that either unit or for that facility?
For me, be prepared. And what I mean by that is come to me with more than just 2 questions. I could bet you my next paycheck and who I'm going to interview next week. They're going to ask me my ratio, and then they're going to ask me how long the orientation is. That's it. That's all the research they do. And I'm like, that's it? So then I try to engage them a little bit more. If I ask you to provide me a scenario, tell me a story, and you're giving me a 1-word answer or a 1-sentence answer, that's not going to work. I'm asking for a story. I'm asking for a scenario. I'm asking for you to maybe talk about your clinicals. What did you see? Was there a time where you saw a nurse go above and beyond for a patient? What did that look like? And really above and beyond, right? So if you're telling me I sat with them and listened, that's not above and beyond for me, right? But if you and your nurse, this patient hasn't been outside in 4 weeks, and you spoke to the physician and you got the RT on board and everybody was okay, and you got the oxygen and you got the family and got everything in order, and he hasn't seen his dog, and you had the family bring the dog and you took him downstairs and you did all of that so that he could spend 5 minutes in the sun with his dog, that is above and beyond. So that's what I'm looking for. That's the art of nursing. That's not science. That's just the art. That's just being human and providing somebody care, being compassionate. So those are the answers that I'm looking. Those are the scenarios. And dig deep. Don't be afraid to share something really emotional. Like, I don't want you to cry at the interview. It's okay to show authenticity and vulnerability. That really spoke to me. And maybe sitting with somebody because you were the student and you were able to, and you found out this person just was going through a lot of pain and you cried with them, and that is a little bit that is beyond. You had that opportunity. But what was it that you did beyond was that you sat with them, you valued them, you heard them, you listened to them, you gave them time. That is beautiful. Those are the kind of things that I look for, and that's what I want to hear in an interview. And I know as a student, I think they're just afraid and they just want to ask. Of course, ask me the tactical stuff, self-scheduling, ratio. Of course you want to know that, but dig deep a little and really prepare. It's pretty amazing how many times I'm like, okay, so now's the time for you to ask me questions. What kind of questions you ask? And we've talked a little bit about the unit, and there's no questions about the unit. There's no questions about the type of patients. There's no questions about what does it mean to have an alcohol withdrawal patient? Can you help me understand that? What does that mean? And they may never have exposure to that in their clinical setting. Ask questions. Show me you're curious, because if you're curious with me in the interview, then I know you'll be curious when it comes time to figure out ways to improve the care of the patient. But if you're not curious with me in the interview, what makes me think that when you see something different in your patient that you're going to ask the doctor about it, or look something up, or ask the pharmacist, hey, do you think the medicine could be doing this to him? Improve the care. Or are you just going to check the box? I did my assessment, I did my restraint, I did check. I'm like, that's just, anybody can check a box.
So definitely don't just try to be the de facto standard of whatever Chat GPT might suggest. And,
Yeah.
and with everything that you're talking about, how did you get to that point where that was what you wanted? Is it just experience over time, or did you have somebody that kind of helped you see the light?
As a leader, you mean, when I like the kind of people I...
As a leader to evaluate people, and because I'm sure what you're looking for in your team are things that you pride yourself with, right? The curiosity and things like that. Were you naturally always this curious, or was it something that happened throughout your early career that kind of made you go, you've got to be more curious?
Two things. So yes, I'm naturally curious. Hence, I wanted to be a journalism, right? I always want to find out more and ask a lot of questions. So I definitely, and I love talking to people. So I like asking questions. I love to sit and people watch and make up stories and be like, ooh, I wonder what they're about. I do like that. But I think over time as a leader, I realized I've gotten better at interviewing and looking for that, because I've realized that not only, I can't just hire by skill, right? I need to make sure I'm hiring for the culture that I want on my unit, right? And if I want a culture of curiosity, I better hire people that are curious. I'm never going to have it if I don't. And especially over the last my first healthcare manager role, I took over a unit that was pretty much struggling because it had multiple directors and managers, and it had 20 travelers just on night. So it didn't have a culture. It didn't have an identity. And so I was like, that's the first thing we got to do, is figure out what it is, our identity. And I knew the kind of nurse I was and the kind of nurses that I loved working with. So I loved working with fun, compassionate nurses that went above and beyond with the patients, and nurses that would figure out ways to celebrate a birthday with somebody, but we couldn't have candles, just do things. And I was like, those were my favorite coworkers, right? They were my bread and butter. They were my jam. I was like, okay, I loved it. I had a great shift. I know who I got with me. Everybody to jump in. So I always looked for those kind of employees interviewing, but I got better at asking better questions, and I'm still improving my questions. I think sometimes I ask in the beginning of my career, I'd ask the kind of the de facto questions, the behavioral health kind of type questions. And yeah, it might get you some good people, but at the end of the day, what I realized, yeah, that's not good. What I need to do is engage more in conversation to really see this person come out, right? Is this the type of person? Is this the personality we want in the unit? If I get somebody who's just not curious and not asking me questions and just, and only goes back to skill and here's my task, and in a year I want to be here and I don't want to be here anymore. And I'm like, okay, you're not wowing me. That's it. And if they ask, I'm like, describe to me that employee, your coworker that would be your ideal team player. What does that mean to you? And when they really can't, and they just tell me somebody that helps me. All right, but what does that look like? What does that look like? So the new grads have a hard time answering that, but I think they need to reflect on their clinicals a little bit better. You worked with nurses, right? You saw nurses that did really good teamwork. What did that look like? And then you saw the nerds that like, nobody came to me. They weren't happy to see you. They really didn't want you as a student. And that always breaks my heart because that's not fair. But you can learn something from that person, right? But what you can learn is that's not the nurse I want to be. So that's what I'm looking for. So what did you learn from that person? Well, that person wasn't a team player and they were grumpy and nobody came to them. And all right, perfect. That lets me know you don't want to be that kind of nurse. Perfect. So that's the kind of stuff I love hearing. But don't be afraid to share. You don't have to give me names so you're not throwing anybody under the bus. But I think they're just afraid of that. I'm like, I'm not going to look these people up, I promise. I have a lot more stuff to do. Well, don't worry.
So I think that it's hard to find people that are curious. And I think there are sometimes new grads or younger professionals that don't really know if they meet that. But would you say that being prepared and wanting to be a problem solver could, if you don't know if you're curious or not, but you'd know if you would like to solve problems? Because I think that what you're alluding to is that you're looking for people that will think beyond what's in front of them, or maybe taking it one step further. I think sometimes you can say, correct me if you don't believe the same, but you don't necessarily think of yourself as curious, but you're like, I like to solve problems and I like to prevent problems. So those traits, if they came out at an interview or in a conversation that you discovered that they like to solve problems, they like to think beyond, they like to try to cut things off at the pass, that could substitute for what might be deemed curiosity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think because if you're trying to solve a problem, you're going to start asking questions, which that's exactly what a curious person does. You're going to go, why is my patient suffering from? So then you're going to start asking questions. Are you going to look it up? Are you going to ask a doc? Are you going to ask a pharmacist? Are you going to ask your coworker? Are you going to talk to another experienced RN and be like, hey, so this is happening. Have you ever seen this before? Whether you know it or not, you're trying to solve the problem, but you're trying to solve it with curious questions. So they go hand in hand. I don't think you can be a problem solver without having the trait of curiosity. Otherwise, you're not trying to solve the problem. You're just like, all right, yeah. Problem's there.
There's a problem. Someone will get to it.
Yeah, somebody will get to it. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, absolutely. I love problem solvers. I think those are the staff that will go. And I love when they do this. Even if it's something small, they don't realize the impact. Hey, it'd be really nice if we had a sign that reminded us of the days of the week that we got to change the IV tubing. It's hard to remember which tubing has to be changed when, and couldn't even make something. Absolutely. Sure. It's simple. That doesn't take high technology. It's literally a piece of paper. Take the stickers, put it on there, and boom. Everybody loved it, right? That person was just asking a question to solve a problem. And they're like, could we do that? They'll make, absolutely. Gave them full reign, and it was something they did on their time, on their shift. It took all of like 10 minutes. They're like, this was great. Why didn't we think of this before? I'm like, I don't know. Why didn't you? So I love it. I love it. Doesn't have to be, I think that's the other thing is there's a lot of mistake when people they think it has to be big. Like when I'm like, what does the evidence say? They're like, oh God, I got to pull. And I'm not asking you to pull 20 dissertations or 20 literature articles or anything like that. Start with asking people around, look at our policy, see what the reference is. And then they're like, oh, do we have a librarian? I'm like, we do. We're very lucky at Honor Health. We have a librarian that supports the organization. And all you got to do is send her a little question on a form. And she is super excited to go, oh, how many articles do you want? Only 5, only 10? What do you want? She does all the work for you. And you're like, oh, that's amazing. I'm like, I don't want you to go back to nursing school and you don't have to write your capstone. What is it? Don't recreate the wheel if you don't have to. But if you find nothing is out there, then let's talk about that. Yeah. It's kind of funny. Sometimes I think it's going to be like this huge task. And I'm like, it's not really a big task.
In your experience, your career, what was a time that you felt like you were able to utilize different things around you, such as the thing you were just talking about, to help find a better outcome when other people may not have seen it right away? Because I do believe that in healthcare, you don't have to be the doctor to help people advance their prognosis or to find better care. However you want to look at it, you can advance someone's recovery by being that curious, by being that problem solver. Do you have a situation that sticks out of what kind of really solidified that, able to take it beyond just the standards of care or bedside rounding?
Probably a lot, actually, that I have. When I was the bedside nurse, I was very lucky in that the 2 main organizations that I worked for, the 2 children's hospitals, were probably a little bit ahead of adult care in the sense of we did multidisciplinary rounds, probably even before really a lot of adult care centers did. And the beauty was I was very blessed to have physicians that really wanted to hear from the nurses. And so in both organizations, Children's Memorial and Children's of LA, when you did bedside rounds, it was a multiple disciplinary approach. So it was a physician, it was the intensivist that was there, their fellow, the resident, therapy, pharmacy was there a lot of times, social work. Again, peds was very ahead because it was not just the patient, right? You had a family. You always had a family when you had pediatrics. So you had to involve social work. What kind of we were probably talking about social determinants of health, not calling them that. We were like, what support do they need? Are they on access? Do they need help? These were a lot of sick kids that needed long-term care. Who's going to take care of them at home? Can the parent take care of them, or do they have to work? So we were talking about this way back in the 80s. And so you had to involve social work, case management, the intensivist. The intensivist would expect a report from the nurses, which was amazing. So I was taught very early on, I need to know what's going on with my patient head to toe. So I need to know the consultant that was on, what they said, what they recommended, because I was expected to give a report to my intensivist and the fellow. And then they would ask the fellow and the resident anything more to add, blah, blah, blah. And then we would come up with a plan of care, right? What's changed, Zoraida, since last 12 hours? What's going on? How are they doing? And then they did their physical assessment. That's amazing. And I think totally contributed hands down to my ability to do that in LA. And then my ability to help coach and teach my nurses. That's expected of me from you. And I think you can do it. So nowadays it's a little bit on a med surg floor, my telemetry unit. It's different. It's very multidisciplinary rounds, very easy to do and very natural in an ICU setting, whether it's a pediatric ICU or an adult ICU. But on the floor, not so much. Doesn't mean though that part of it can't be done, right? Doesn't mean that as a nurse, I can still read my consultant notes, read the social work note, and meet with the doc and say, here's what I read. Here's what did you read? Oh, I read this. Okay, let's talk. Let's go to the doc patient, and then they do it, right? And sometimes we get lucky and we can get the social worker involved. Or is it that we do more formal planned care conferences, right? So I think I was very fortunate to have that. And that allowed me to always think about how to use my resources right there. I don't have to be the expert in meds all the time. I've got pharmacy, right? I don't have to be the expert in their diagnosis. That's my physician. Help me understand. That's where I would talk to the pulmonologist. Well, what's going on with their lungs? What do I need to know that I don't know so that if I see something change, I'm going to call you? And so I was really lucky that in both of those organizations, that was the expectation and they wanted you to ask questions. I think that's where that I keep on coming back to that asking questions. You have to. If you want to find out what's going on in your patient and the best for them, you have to ask questions. And I think really ultimately, most physicians that I've had the pleasure of working with appreciate that. I'm talking to you, help me, what's going on? What kind of questions do you have for this patient? Because they have, I think what nurses forget, and when they really remember, it's such a spark. Doctors have about 20 to 25 patients, right? They can't be everywhere. There's no way. They're managing the care from a higher point of view, right? They are looking to you to be the eyes and the ears of the patient. They're trusting you are going to tell them when they need to be at the bedside and when they don't. They are trusting you to tell them all the changes and the things that have happened over the last 8 hours because they weren't there. You were there, right? So when you realize that is such a responsibility and really a privilege, and the doc also recognizes and values that, that is pure genius and a win-win for the patient. No, everybody benefits, the nurse, the doctor, and the patient, and they get to go home, right? But if you don't recognize that that is your responsibility, it is a privilege. You are the eyes and ears pretty much of everybody, right? But especially that physician who is trying to make good decisions for this patient to get them home. That's just amazing. It's amazing. And when you see it, it's golden, and the families feel it and the patient sees it and they get to go home.
That's great. That's exactly what you would hope on every single patient would expect. That's what's going on behind the scenes. And I think that everything that you're mentioning is such really positive advice for those that want to be successful in terms of what to catch yourself. Because I always think that there's two sides to every coin. And I do think that sometimes people do a very good job interviewing, and then the actions speak louder than words. So they get into the unit or they get into the job, it doesn't have to be the healthcare setting, and then things are different, or they knew exactly how to prepare for the interview, but then actually being in the mix of things, they're not doing what you want them to do. They're not acting the way that you would expect based off of the way that the interview went. What are some red flags that you see that people do on the unit or while they're working with you on your team that would be contrary to what you want?
Yeah, I think so. One, I try really hard, and I'm not perfect, nor is my team, but we meet routinely with our new hires. Some people are great at, some leaders are 30, 60, 90. I do the same, and then in between, I do meet with them and their preceptor, sometimes informally, sometimes formally. Sometimes I'm just rounding on the unit and take a look. Hey, how's it going? Some red flags for me are not taking seriously the required education for your role, right? If you're falling behind, I've sent you a couple of emails, not responding to my emails. And I do realize that work emails aren't always read, right? Timely. So I do send things to their personal emails if it's about them, right? Don't have to, but I recognize, hey, I value when I get a response back. Doesn't have to be within 30 seconds, but if you respond to me within a day, I've received your emails, Zoraida, I'll be right on it. My apologies, blah, blah, blah. Perfect. If you're not responsive to that, you're ignoring a communication that's important, right? Then I need to understand, okay, what's going on there? If you disregard infection control practices and you don't think you don't take them seriously, help me understand why you didn't think it was okay to follow that, right? Why are you in a contact isolation room without the proper PPE on? And if it wasn't emergent for you to go in, like, what's going on, right? I've watched that, I've seen it, and everybody makes mistakes. So if that employee was to come back to me and say, hey, I got to let you know, I got to own that was on me. Won't happen again. Perfect. Check it off. They recognized it. They owned it. No problem. Happens a third time, but still no accountability and no check. That's a big red flag, right? That tells me you did great in the interview. You're not taking this seriously. Safety for me is extremely important. And it's the first thing you need to do as a clinician. And if you're not taking those safety ABCs, parameters, all of that, and I think sometimes on med-surg units and tele units, they just go, that's ICU. And I'm like, nope, everybody has airway, breathing, and circulation. Everybody has it. Your room needs to be prepared for the worst. And you have the equipment. You don't take that seriously. You don't take infection control issues seriously. That's a problem. Then that means you're going from one patient to the next. You're not washing your hands. You're taking one germ to the other. That's not okay. You learned in science. This isn't new. That's not okay. Those are big red flags for me. Yeah, and those are things that we work them out and they either get on board or they recognize that this isn't the right place for them.
I think that as a leader, it's really nice to hear that you've given a lot of thought into how to approach these things, because we all know that we all make mistakes, and absolutely owning up to them is so big.
So big.
And I would say that the new generation doesn't necessarily take that to heart. And some might even go the opposite way, where they apologize for everything. And then are you learning, or do you just think that you can make mistakes all the time and just apologize for them and you move forward?
There is accountability and responsibility, and you hit it right on the head. So, saying you're sorry, great. I'm glad. That's awesome. But what did you learn from this mistake, and how are you going to make sure that it doesn't happen again? Big or small? So recently, for example, I had 2 nurses involved in an error. The response from each of them very different. One was very much apologetic, but plus accountable, owned it, didn't scurry, didn't try to come up with excuses or reasons why, right? Without explaining her story. She explained her story. I understood. We walked it through. That was fine. But she owned it. I said, hey, I want you to take a couple days, reflect on what happened. Then I want you to come back to me. I'm going to come up with a plan. Did the same thing with the other. No accountability, almost a blank, like very uncomfortable with the feedback. I'm like, so what do we think we could have done differently? Not recognizing the error, not realizing ultimately it was her responsibility, it was her patient. Even though her coworker was helping her and they both made the mistake together, she alluded that the other nurse made the mistake. And I'm like, that was your patient and you were there. And what did you do after? There was very little accountability. Now, both we worked together and both had the same process and education follow-up and et cetera, et cetera. The other one that took accountability from the very beginning immediately responded to my email, did the assignment, thanked me for it, definitely found it useful. Just is going to grow and is going to be great. The other one didn't respond to the first email, not the second, finally the third. And then now she's, I've completed. But the response, so now I'm a little more worried on that nurse B than I am on nurse A. I don't worry about her anymore. She learned it. She'll never do it again. Not that it was so bad, but more importantly, it really impacted her. She didn't recognize until we talked, and she's, oh my gosh. And so she owned it. She learned from it, and she thanked me for coaching her through it. And she was like, got it. And I'm sharing what I learned with others. Awesome. I couldn't have asked for a better end result. The other one, is on my radar to go, all right, let's watch her. Let's make sure she's okay. But there's definitely, and I think some of it's maturity. I think you hit it on the nail. I think a lot of times what I'm noticing with my newer generation as a whole, and I don't like brushing everybody with the same paintbrush. That's not cool. But in general, I think today people struggle with feedback. People struggle with being coached, right? If I pull somebody in the office, because I do a lot of coaching in private, right? If I see somebody respond a certain way or answer harshly to somebody, I'll tap them on the shoulder. Hey, do you have a sec? And I don't want to embarrass anybody, right? But they're not in trouble. They're not getting written up. I don't do that. But it's, hey, so help me understand what was going on there. Hey, I heard you say this. Did you know that the patient also heard you? Did you know the family heard you? What's going on? You're not seeing yourself. Or how do we think we could have said that a little differently? A lot of them are like, am I in trouble? That's the first thing they say. And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to make sure though, that my job is to coach you. My job is to get you to be the best you can be, right? In all forms of nursing, and communication is a big piece of it. So what I heard didn't seem to be okay, right? So let's walk through it. How do you think you could have replied a little differently? And so they really are uncomfortable with it. They're like, I don't understand this coaching. I had somebody send me an email that was very intense. And I was like, all right, I'm going to have to provide them a little coaching. Like, luckily for me, I've been doing this long enough that I was like, all right, I don't take it personally. Like, they're young, immature. They were frustrated. I've done it myself. And I'm always like, there's an acronym, HALT, which says never send an email. And in today's world, you could say text, you can say chat, right? Just never send anything in writing if you are hungry, angry, feeling lonely, or really tired, right? So just remember that. And for years when I was a new leader, I was like, I had that on my computer. And then I'm like, I'm going to write a Word document first. And I'm like, okay. And before ChatGPT, my husband is who I use because he's an English major from Penn. And I was like, hey, this is what I want to say. And I'm a little frustrated, but I think I'm coming across wrong. And so I would send it to him. And he's like, yeah, we're going to remove that. And we're going to remove that. And I was like, great. And then he'd refine. I was like, oh, that is much more professional. So I've had to coach them that. And I'm like, hey, so just FYI, just like in texting, all caps means you're yelling at me, accusing me and saying these things. Harsh. I am your manager. I'm your director. I'm the end receiver. Are you really that angry? Or are you really shouting at me? I'm like, no, I didn't mean that. And I'm like, okay, that's how it came across. So remember, there's no tone in written language, right? There's no tone in a text. There's no tone in a chat. So be mindful of that. It's happened a couple times with the ability to chat on our EMR between nurses and physicians. And there was this nurse and physician, the chat started off great. And then something happened. And all of a sudden it went to intense, and then they were angry. And then I'm getting a call and I'm like, huh. So then she pulled up her chat for me. She's like, I don't see what the problem is. That is, she was angry and it was okay. And I went, there it is. I said, right there. See how you replied back? Like, two wrongs don't make a right. He should definitely have not chatted that to you, but there was definitely a misunderstanding. So it would have been better had you just picked up the phone, right? And said, hey, you just sent me that chat. I think maybe you misunderstood. How can I help you? She's like, yeah, I guess that would have been better. I'm like, this guy's really nice. You guys started off beautifully in the chat. I'm not really sure why it just took a turn for the worse. And so she's learned, and yeah, I guess I could have picked up the phone. I'm like, so it's just funny. It's just they forget that there's no tone in the text or the chat. So be mindful of that. Be careful.
But really quick, the HALT. I have never heard that acronym, and I feel like I've tried to absorb a ton of stuff on leadership, on good business practices. That's awesome. Where did you learn that?
I don't know. I learned it a long time ago. I might have read it somewhere. I might have heard it in a class. I've used it for years. Early 2000s, I learned that. And I've shared it a million times.
Well,
I
it's
must
great.
have either attended a class or I read it in a book.
Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. HALT.
Tired. Yep.
If any of those are applying to you at this moment.
Email, chat, no. It could imagine like if you were broken up with somebody. You didn't even take it in there. And you're angry, you're lonely. What are you going to do? You're going to send that text. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't send the text. It really, anything in your life, really. Angry at your loved one, and a cousin that upset you, and Now you're on Facebook or Instagram and you're ridiculously posting things and you're just angry. Don't do it. Just don't do it.
Especially healthcare is no comparison to almost any other industry. You spend more time with your coworkers than you do with your family sometimes.
Yep.
So if you, outside of work, like you're saying personally, if you send a text or send some message that upsets somebody or you didn't say it right, you're probably not going to see them frequently as someone you work with, especially in healthcare. So it's like twice as important to hear that and remember that in a healthcare profession than anywhere else, just because you're going to see them again.
Absolutely. And 99% of what I have to, of the complaints I receive and if there is friction between staff or friction between a nurse and a physician, honestly, Javier, 99% of the time it's communication. A lack of, a misunderstanding, a typo. It's always about communication. Always. It's hands down. I think everybody needs to go through communication, like physicians and nurse, anybody. It's just you're dealing with people. And it's getting worse and worse. It's shocking. And like I chatted them. And I'm like, how many times do you send a chat before you're not getting an answer, yet you're getting frustrated? Did you try calling them? No.
Do you think it's a lack of confidence for people not to call? Because we experience this in business a lot too.
Yeah.
I sent them a Teams message. I sent them a Teams message, or I sent them an email. And you're like, and when you didn't hear from them or you didn't like what they said, you just felt like going back and forth electronically was better than just picking up the phone and calling them?
I do think it's a cultural thing. I definitely think it's influenced, like just today's culture, not necessarily even generational. I think it's just the way things have moved, the phone, the access, the constant. The irony is all this communication is all written, but nobody really does really good writing. You know what I mean? Nobody really does English and all that. So it's all abbreviations and text and quick chats and emojis. And they think, oh, I'm going to say it, but then I'll put an emoji so it won't sound as bad. And I'm like, yeah, that was a snarky comment. Putting a wink at the end of it, not going to really smooth it over for me. Again, I think it's just the way things are. And the irony is like so even just yesterday, and I'm biased, right? I'm a Gen Xer, but we did talk more, right? There was no text. So we had it, like my mom would get so angry with me, the one phone in the house and the long cord. And I was always in the corner of the kitchen and on for hours. And she's, oh my gosh. But I loved it. So yesterday, there was an incident between my unit and another unit. Now, I could have just emailed the director, right? But again, there's no tone in verbal and written communication. I could write the best email. But I was like, why am I going to waste time with an email? I'm just going to call her. She's my colleague. I should be able to, if I'm expecting my staff, and I do say to them, you need to resolve, if you can, one-on-one first, then come to me. So I need to lead by example. If I'm not willing to do that, I can't ask my staff to do that. So it wasn't even a thought. I immediately was like, I need to call her. I'm not going to send her an email. This is not going to come across well in an email. It was about something that was happening between my staff and her staff. We need to resolve it ASAP. And we did. And luckily she was receptive. She was appreciative. I didn't yell at her and attack her. She didn't yell at me and attack me. She was like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, hey, this is going on. I don't know if this is normal. Asked each other questions and gave her what I knew. And then I went back to my staff. She asked me to ask questions. We did. We resolved it. Done in 5 minutes, right? Or in under 30 minutes, I should say. No email. She doesn't need another email from me. We both get 100 emails a day. The last thing I want is an email for this going, oh my Lord, why didn't somebody just pick up the phone? This is simply a miscommunication. So it is definitely a cultural thing. I see it in business all the time. You're right, in different businesses, but it really is quite prevalent and obviously I'm only in healthcare, but it is quite prevalent in healthcare. I get physicians that will say, hey, I got this chat. And I'm like, okay, that wasn't a cool chat. Like what? Call the nurse in. Why'd you send this chat? I was angry. Okay. Again, that's when I teach them to halt. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's communication. It's shocking. It's so important. Under discussed, not taught in nursing school. I think some medical schools, a long time ago, I read an article, I think that they started introducing that actually to med students about bedside manner, communication, the simple act of pulling up a chair, right, to a patient makes them feel like you are listening more, that you are spending more time with them, that you are really addressing their concerns. I do it all the time if I can. If there's an extra chair in the room, the family isn't using the chair, I'll pull up a chair, even if I'm just coming by to say hi, but especially if I'm there for listening to a concern or something. And it makes a huge difference. I think I get a little lucky too. I'm a small person in general. My stature is small. So I think a lot of times when they are really heightened and angry, it helps because I'm small. They're like, oh, I can't yell at somebody that small. Hold on a second. I think that does work to my advantage and I'll use it. And then I make myself just a little bit smaller by sitting and coming up closer. They're like, oh, it really is amazing how that de-escalates. So it's pretty funny.
It's funny that you bring that up because I believe that if you've ever dealt with children, I don't know where I heard it, but I've heard it multiple times, to get eye level with children to help de-escalate or to help them understand a point, it makes such a big difference, that body language of being at the level, because standing up indicates that it's a temporary conversation, or it's whatever is going to be said is fleeting almost. I believe it in a sense of being a dad. I think that I've practiced that a lot. I get down on one knee and I talk to my daughter eye to eye because I think that it hits better when you're at their level, because most of the patients, they're not going to be standing up. They're going to be down. So you're towering over them. Yeah.
And even if I'm standing, they still have to look up. I'm short, but I'm not that short. Yes. And it's just, again, I don't spend more time. It's just really, they really appreciate it when you pull up a chair. It's the old adage of Mr. Rogers. He pulled up a chair and he sat and talked to everybody in the camera. He was talking to the kids. He wasn't talking to the kids while he was standing. He was sitting in a chair on the bench, putting on shoes, like always. It's amazing. And even when my teenagers, when they were struggling, trying to get them to see me, to get them connect eye to eye when they're up here escalated, really worked, right? As opposed to me going higher and yelling more. It just doesn't work. Just doesn't work.
So I was going to ask, like, these things that we're talking through, I know that for me, it was a combination of hearing people talk about it. So maybe some lectures, some books I read. Is there anything that when you talk about your leadership style or your approach to managing a team, de-escalating situations, all those things, was there a book that you read or a conference that you went to that really stood out as something where you really were able to gain a lot of this leadership knowledge?
I don't think there's one book in general. I think there's probably several for me, and they're probably not really traditional. Like for healthcare, they're not all deemed towards healthcare, really. One recently, or not, when I say recently, I would probably say in the last 5 years, Culture Renovation is an amazing book. It literally gives you a blueprint of how if you need to change the culture in a department, in a work, a corporation, a company, it gives you like step by step of how to do it. So it's amazing. So that was always look for books that actually give me the tools, not just the concepts. I'm like, that's great, but how do I implement that? You're just giving me theory. I can read theory till I'm blue in the face. Help me. That's why I'm looking, right? That one was it's right in my office. It's tagged, it's earmarked. I still forget some steps and then I'm like, oh, I misstepped. I got to go back. But that's the beauty. And I love the term renovation versus transformation, because in every place that you take on, there's some good, right? They've done good. So when you say you're just going to transform, you're not acknowledging their history and you're saying to them, nothing that you did before mattered. And I'm like, that's not great. Yeah, they're struggling right now, but I'm sure they did some good stuff, right? And so that's why you want to renovate, just like an old house, a historic place, right? You don't just tear it down. You're like, that arch is beautiful. We're leaving it. That whatever etching is beautiful. We're leaving it, right? But they clearly need AC, right? Because it's a building that didn't have AC. It's 110 now. We're going to put some AC in. So we're making it better. We're not going to just tear it down. Atomic Habits by James Clear is not only what I recommend for personal growth and habit forming, but also for process change and for not getting discouraged when things aren't going right. So leadership is hard. It is so hard. And you are getting every day you're dealing and trying to solve problems every single day. And so you have this main goal, right? But that goal could take a full year. Just like if your goal to finish a race or your goal to lose weight or whatever. His concept is that 1% every day. Just look for that 1% improvement every day, and you will eventually get there. His other process is he doesn't really believe necessarily in, and I may be having this wrong, so I apologize, James Clear, but I think this is what you said. Goals are fine, but goals are finite, meaning, okay, so you started these habits because you wanted to lose 10 pounds to fit into that dress. But really what you want, and then once you did it, then you stop the habits. So guess what's going to happen? You're going to gain that weight right back again. So goals are great, but really what you want to do is, if you want a lifestyle change, like for me in the organization or my unit change, I want it to be in the thread of the unit always. So how do we do that? So get the habits forming, but then you still consistently do it every day. If I said we reached our goal of no falls for whatever amount of days because we did this one thing, and then I'm like, yay, we're done, we met our goal, and then we stopped doing it, now we're going to go back to having patient falls again. That doesn't make any sense. So what do we need to do every day, all the time, right? So that it's a unit change, lifestyle change, or your personal lifestyle change. So that's where Atomic Habits comes in. And I literally have a wooden thing that I made. I had somebody on Etsy make it for me. It literally is a wooden statue of 1% made out of wood. And I have it in my office, so that when I get discouraged and I'm like, oh, nothing's working, I'm like, nope, 1%. What was my 1% today? And my 1% may be that one of my staff came in and said, hey, I just want to thank you for that article, or I want to thank you for the staff meeting, or hey, just thanks, whatever. I'm like, oh, there you go. There's my 1%. Culture changing. She recognized what we did. I'm good. So those two books were really ideal. I started reading Good to Great. That's another great one about getting the right people on the bus. That is huge when it comes to hiring and it comes to really finding out what kind of team you want. These books were made for businesses, not necessarily healthcare. And I think as leaders, we need to look outside like that and then bring them in. What's another?
Was there something that you read based off of something that you were experiencing? Because I don't want to get all the way to the end without asking you this question, but what do you think the hardest thing that you had to learn? And you could reference that there was a book that you may have turned to help figure it out. But I know that as a leader, you have to figure out your style. It doesn't happen. What you think that your style is before you go into leadership isn't the style that usually ends up being your style. So
exactly,
you run into some hardships. What do you think is the hardest thing that you had to figure out as a leader? And then how did you figure it out?
It's funny. I think the hardest thing I had to figure out was I didn't have to solve everyone's problem on the spot. That was really good. And it's funny because my nurses, I teach them like, hey, it's okay if you don't know the answer to your patient's question, but don't say, I don't know. Say, I don't know, but let me find out. I'm going to find out for you. That's a great question. And I wasn't doing the same as a leader. I was like, they would ask me a question. I'm like, I'm thinking I should have a right answer. And I would have an answer, but that wasn't the right answer for them. Giving myself grace to realize I got to figure what's right for you. And I don't know. And we're going to fumble through this together. I think this is what you might need. And just, I think being really vulnerable and honest with my staff has something I've learned over time. I don't have to always be the word. I don't want to say stoic because that actually stoicism gets a bad rap because it's actually really good. That's another book I'm reading, Daily Works of Stoicism, 365 Days of Stoicism. Amazing. But I think it's just like you can be vulnerable, but not necessarily like then have your staff feel bad for you. I think it's okay for staff to see that you're not perfect. I think one of the best things that I do is I admit when I'm wrong to my staff. I think that is really, I think some leaders never do that. And I think that can be dangerous because then your staff is going to feel that they can't make a mistake and admit that they're wrong. And that means from, let's say we go to implement a change and we try it. And I'm really a big believer on the PDSA and 30, 60, 90. And in the beginning in my current organization, my current unit, they didn't really like it. And nobody likes change. And they were resistant. And they're like, nope. And I've gotten much better about how to introduce that. So one of my first manager roles, I came in, bulls ablazing, and I thought everybody's going to be as excited as me to make change. Everybody's going to want to do something better. Like even the docs, this is going to be great. So I just came in and making changes. And yeah, that didn't work out well at all. It was bad. But I was like, oh, it was hugely did I realize I got to see who my stakeholders are. I got to get them to buy. I got to learn who they are. What do they really want to change and need, right? I may have a list of things, but I need to make sure that I get them on board and involve them in the change. That was probably the biggest thing I learned early on. And it wasn't because I was trying to, with bad intention. It was all with good intention, but I just didn't realize how important it was to get them involved and realize, oh, not everybody's excited as change as I am. Yeah. So I've learned that really early on, and I've not repeated that, and I get better and better each time. And so then I'll admit, yeah, that wasn't a good idea, huh, guys? And they're like, yeah, not so much. I'm like, all right, what didn't work out about it? And I'm okay asking that. And they're like, it didn't work out because of X, Y, and Z. So then we start talking about, do we think the whole idea is bad, or do we think the way we implement it was bad? And then they're like, oh, I think the way we implement it was bad. And I'm like, all right, well, how do we want to try it again? And they're like, oh, we're going to try this again? I'm like, yeah, because our goal still is to improve X, Y, and Z. But that didn't work for us. And so they're like, oh, okay, so we can try a different way. I'm like, we can try a different way until we figure it out. And they're like, oh, so I think they like that. They're realizing like, all right, because they'll get worried. They'll hear a change happens in another unit. And like, is that going to happen in ours? And I'm like, okay, slow down. What's the change? I don't know what's going on. And so I'm like, no, but if you like that idea, we can try it. We can try it here. And they're like, yeah, I like it, but I don't like the way that they're doing it. And I'm like, all right, how would you like to do it? So I've learned that finally after 20 plus years. Yeah.
Do you think that's the lesson for a leader to figure out, the piece that everybody's not as passionate about what you're passionate about, and no one's required to, or you get scared if everybody's on board with you right off the bat? At least I would nowadays, because I'm like, someone's faking it or everyone's faking it. But
Exactly.
what do you think is the advice you would give to new managers coming in onto the floor or into a healthcare organization?
I think patience with yourself is probably one of the hardest things new managers struggle with, right? They're not there, especially if they've been a nurse. They're like, I've been a nurse for 15 years. So they think that this is just going to come as easy and change will happen and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, this is very different. This is a whole different role. So really giving yourself grace, just like you did when you were at the bedside, learning how to be that excellent clinician, right? You gave yourself grace. So give yourself grace in learning how to have the conversations and learning how to do those coaching methods and those coaching sessions, recognizing that there may be days where 80% of the staff is really not happy with you, right? Because you have to implement a change, maybe due to regulatory, maybe because of the message that came down. But if you are honest and transparent with them, they'll get on your side, right? They'll understand. So I think for me, when you're a new leader, like being honest and transparent with your staff as much as you can goes a long way, and admitting your mistakes, right? If you have to implement something that is required due to regulatory or the organization overall, right, is going this way, be honest. Say, hey, so here's the change that's coming down. Here's the change. Here's why. And it's going to be uncomfortable. So now is the time to share with me. Ask me your questions. Let's figure it out together. Here's what we can do. We get the option of rolling it out the way we think it's going to work for us, but we don't get the option of not doing it, right? So you do have a little flexibility there, but just remember, you don't get the option of opting out. This is a must. It has to get done. So let's talk about it. Versus just coming in and being like, has to get done. They made the decision. They're not going to trust you more, right? If you just blame it on that doesn't mean they're going to trust you more. They need to know that you understand this isn't going to be easy, right? And you recognize it's going to be uncomfortable, and you might even be frustrated, even yourself, but you understand that this team is going to be frustrated by this change. But give it a chance. We got to do it. Here's the why, and let's move forward, right? And I'm going to be there with you side by side, and I'm going to hear your feedback, and I'm going to be really honest with you. Nope. It's not going to happen. It can't happen, right? That can't go forward, but we can maybe do this, right? So I think just that honesty, patience with yourself, being very honest with your staff as much as you can, right? And it's transparent. Obviously there are some things that you cannot share, right? I think my staff, so if you have a problem employee, right? And you are working the process, a lot of staff don't understand why it takes so long. Why they should be gone. I'm not seeing a change. And they get really angry. And then they confuse that with you are not doing something. And then either the person ends up not being with the organization anymore, or you do see the change or whatever the end result ends up being, right? And they see it and they're like, oh, why did it take so long? And really what they need to understand is, one, I'm not going to share with you the conversations in the private disciplinary or coaching often, what's happening with that employee. That's not fair. You would not want me to do that with you if that was you. And in that same way, you would, if you made a mistake or an error or something was going on, you would want to be given opportunity to either course correct, fix it, whatever it is, right? Versus me just getting rid of you. So when you shape it and you kind of help them understand and see, oh yeah, wait a minute, if it was me, I would not want you discussing it with everybody. And I absolutely want you to give me opportunity to fix it. That's what I'm doing. And so they're like, oh, okay. And then they eventually see the change, whether that means the person's there, right? Or no longer there, or if they're there, that the person has changed. Sometimes it's hard to, you just want to be like, just let me finish it. And you're like, but you have to give them some information. You just have to know what information to give.
And that might be a whole other topic that would take us what to say and when to say it and all of those things. Because that in itself encapsulates a lot of issues that can reignite a flame that you don't want to reignite. But it goes back to your communication piece, which is an amazing thing, that communication, which is so important in all aspects of business, healthcare, no matter what job you have, that it is not as highly emphasized as it should. Because I believe it is available in almost every college, but not necessarily required at the level that maybe we as leaders should or would have to have had it when we were going through. Because I know that for myself, I did take communication classes, but to not to the effect that I think that the teams might need, or leaders coming up might need it. It's very interesting.
Sure. Absolutely. And healthcare is different. When you're dealing with HR, there's like HR and there's coaching for just personal growth. There's, what do I say? I think another thing that I would really tell new leaders is, in the beginning, you're not going to be, I think people sometimes confuse with being friendly and being a friend, right? For me, and this could be very personal for everybody else, but I really do not accept social media connections with my staff. If you are a direct report of mine, I'm like, nope. And it's not because I don't want to see, it's just, there's a blurry line for me. Then it gets too blurry, right? So I need to keep that a little separate. However, I think when it comes to communication at work, one of the biggest things that I see that staff appreciate over and over again is consistency, right? Fairness, and then the transparency. There's nothing more frustrating to staff than that rule didn't apply to so-and-so, but now you're putting it on me. If there are things like that you can clean up when you're new, the staff appreciate it. So nothing frustrates staff more than somebody's getting special treatment, and it's not really fair, right? Yep. Everybody has a story. Everybody has responsibilities outside of work.
Absolutely. And it's interesting when you actually implement rules and put everybody on the same playing field. I feel like it's one of those things that you become automatic, and there's no guessing, because I do believe that the unknown causes fear, and it could be for whatever reason. But if it's not known whether or not you're going to get paid, if it's not known whether or not you're going to get in trouble, rules help people to know when they will or when they won't get in trouble, where their boundaries are. And people, I found that, like you experienced as well, when you have the rules in place initially and everybody's following it, everybody that comes in will follow it because everybody else is doing it. But when the opposite occurs and you have no rules and everything is chaotic, it breeds chaos. It's the same thing, but in reverse.
Totally. You get people build workarounds, and then there's the cliques of groups, and do it this way and do it that way. And you're like, oh my gosh, how confusing is that for somebody walking into an organization or a new unit? And that's just a simple one, right? But it really just helps them know, what is the rule? Oh, that's the rule? Okay. What's the rule with tardies? What's the rule with attendance? It's policy. Let's check it out. Let's look at it. There are always exceptions. People, I'm like, you can't be so rigid that you're not allowing exceptions, right? So, for example, the rule is if you're going to be out sick, you need to call 2 hours prior to your schedule, to the start of your shift.
Right.
Now, if you're involved in an accident and you weren't able to, right? And then you call me when you're okay in the ED and you're like, oh my, we get it. We're not going to hold that against you. That's an exception. Where I think people forget that. I'm like, we're not even going to ding you on the tardy. Like, you were in an accident and you couldn't get to a phone, like whatever. It happens. Or
Unfortunately, yeah.
kid gets, or something happens. And so we understand that. We understand that life happens. When life happens 80% of the time, you're like, what's happening? Life doesn't happen that often.
And yeah. And I think that setting those boundaries also helps leaders lead and focus on the more important things, because if you don't have the rules and it is chaotic, then you're spending a lot of time on small minutia when you could be spending it on more important issues for the organization itself or for the unit.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the staff, again, like we've said this a million times, they just appreciate it. They're like, cool. And then and it's funny because you'll hear them, like somebody will be like, I didn't know. And they're like, dude, how'd you not know? Like, it's in every state. Like, she talks about the staff meeting, it's on there, posted. Like, they just they're like, oh my God, we've heard it a million times from Zoraida. How do you not know? So I love hearing that sometimes, because then I'm like, there you go. It's not on me. They're like, don't say that to her. It's been posted. She talked about it. It's in an email. Oh my gosh. Like, how did you not know? And it's funny to hear them say that to their own coworker. And they're like, all right, fair enough. I should have probably read that. It's like, so it's great when you hear that. You're like, great. I don't have to even address it now. Perfect. And then you just continue on. It's funny.
Is there anything that we maybe haven't talked about, or that we have talked about, that you just really feel passionate about, that you would want to leave as some final words of wisdom to healthcare professionals, whether they want to be leaders or they're just coming into the profession?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I'd like to leave with. One, for leaders, just specifically, I guess you could say that for this bit of advice, I would say the same for a new grad and for a leader, any leader, whether you're a new leader or not. Allow yourself some grace. It is hard to come in as a new grad, and it is hard to be a leader. I look at leadership and my role, it's almost funny. Like, yes, I'm not a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur. However, when you're a leader of a department, you are the business owner of that franchisee, right? The franchise itself is the main organization, like your parent organization. But your department, you are fully responsible for the product, which is patient care, then the education of your employees, the HR responsibilities, the pay, the fiscal responsibility of supplies, the coaching, the personal growth, the mentoring, and then the conflict resolution, like customer not being happy, meaning your patients aren't happy. So I would definitely suggest and tell all leaders, look to some books outside of your typical healthcare leadership. Look to books that teach you other tools that you can bring in and be like, you know what, if I looked at it this way, this might work. I think that would be huge. Bring humor to your day, every day, and know that it's okay because you're going to make mistakes, for sure. For my nurses, my newbies, still give yourself grace. If you find that acute care isn't for you, don't leave the industry. Don't leave the profession of nursing. The beautiful thing about nursing is that there are 1,000,001 things you can do as a nurse. So don't leave the field, right? If you find you have a knack, what you don't like, try to figure out what it is that you don't like before you jump ship. And in acute care, it could just be, I don't like the chaos of having 4 or more patients and always coming in and everybody coming at me, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so of your shifts, what were the highlights? I really like it when I get to spend time with my patient. Okay, so maybe, just maybe, infusion therapy is your jam. Maybe cancer center, maybe wellness, maybe et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's your jam. So ask if you can shadow, see if there's a position, talk to somebody, talk to your boss and say, do you think you could get me a shadow like shift? Yeah. And so that is an option for you. Don't leave the profession. There's just 1,000,001 things to do. Before you come into the profession, expose yourself to it. If you think you want to come into this profession, find a way to work in it before you are in your 3rd year or your 2nd year of academic, whatever it is. Like, it is very different. Theory sounds beautiful, but then there's practice and practicality in real life. So as early as you can, get into a hospital setting, a skilled nursing, a healthcare setting to determine, do I want to be a nurse? Do I want to be a doctor? Do I want to be a therapist? There's respiratory therapy. Maybe I want to be a physical therapist. Go to it now in Arizona. It's really cool. You can There's tons of physical therapy, like self-standing, like standalone. And I didn't realize Arizona is pretty favorable. You can, as a therapist, run your own business. So maybe you're that guy, that person, that girl that like, I always wanted to run my own business. I just didn't know one in, and I want to help people. And ooh, I love helping people this way. And there's sports medicine. There's just a million and one ways to be in healthcare. So just find the right niche, right? If you want to help people, there's a million and one ways to help people. And I think just if you can expose yourself to that as many times or as different ways as you can before you decide and get that degree, right? It just breaks my heart when I see them after 4 years and they come to me and after 6 months, they're like, I don't want to be here. I don't know what I did. There's nothing more heartbreaking than that. Yeah. And then like I said that before. Yeah, that's probably it. I think just don't leave the profession, find something that you can do. And as a leader, I would say the same thing for leaders too. You may think you want to be a leader. Give it time, give it a couple of years. But I think one of the biggest mistakes I ever did was I stayed in a role way too long, and it took a lot from me. I allowed people to treat me poorly, disrespect me, and I stayed out of fear. So don't stay in a profession out of fear. Don't stay in your schooling out of fear because you're afraid to talk to your parents. You're afraid to make that change. Even though you are literally physically ill when you walk in, or you're showing signs of anxiety, like something's happening and you realize you're really unhappy. Like you said earlier, Javier, we spend so much time at work, right? And there's no utopia. You're not going to be happy 100% of the time, every day, all the day, but it really should provide you joy majority of the time. And if it's not, and the joy doesn't outweigh the hardship, something's wrong. It's time to take a look and really do some self-reflect and make a change. Know that the change doesn't have to be permanent. It could mean you take a step back and go, maybe I want to go back to the bedside. Maybe I don't want to be a leader. That's okay. It's not for everybody. I got to tell you, that's definitely not for everybody. And it is hard. It is a hard job and sometimes very thankless. And when you're a director or manager, you're really that middleman, right? You're taking direction from your executives and the organization, the regulatory agencies, and you have to be that messenger to staff. And then you're also taking feedback and complaints, not just from your staff, but from patients and their families. Who are you going to, right? And a lot of times you have wiggle room, but you don't have a lot. You can make changes, but you can't do a complete overhaul. You can't tell people, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. You don't get that option, right? The executive said no, or the regulatory agent says you have to. It's a really hard spot to be in, and one that does demand grace and flexibility and patience and curiosity and humor, a lot of humor, at least for me. It's the only way. A lot of times that's the only way I get through the day, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And music and a good podcast, either end your day or start your day.
Yeah, I would definitely say that all of that is really great. And the final piece of just figuring out how you like to unwind or how you like to pump yourself up at the beginning of the day, knowing that and doing it in a healthy way, mentally healthy as well as physically healthy, is always good words to live by, especially as a leader who gets everything thrown at them right when they walk in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Really.
Thank you so much, Zoraida, for all of the advice. I hope that we get to more time in the future to talk about other topics that we touched on today. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Brought to you by Staff DNA, the #1 digital marketplace for healthcare careers. Find a job you love today with Staff DNA.